Hi, everyone. I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and thank you so much for tuning in with us today for one of our talks. We are a year-round digital talk series bringing you the best creative voices across film, television, and theater. And today we are joined by the fantastic Philippa Lowthorpe, who is the director of the film Misbehaviour, and Jennifer Hosten, who was the real-life 1970 Miss World winner, whose story is featured in the film. And, I wanted to start by asking you, Philippa, a little bit about the genesis of your involvement in the film, because I know that the initial concept and script started about 10 years ago, and you came into the whole journey about 3 years ago. So it's really interested in how you looked to the details that they'd already mapped out, that they'd already put together, the script that they'd been working on, and really kind of took those details and then figured out how you were going to bring your own individual creative lens to telling the story.
But it was just such a gift to read this wonderful script. And I thought that when I read it, I thought this is a really, really important story to tell right now, to look back 50 years and see what happened in 1970, to see what times were like then, and then to see how far we've still got to go. And the other thing that really attracted me to this story is I love real stories. I love telling real people's stories, and was the chance to meet the real women behind this story. So Jennifer Hosten, Pearl Jansen, the two contestants, and also the women of the women's liberation movement, who then, were in their 20s, really young, vibrant women who did this mad thing and put women's liberation on the map all over the world in such a crazy way. It felt like such a gift of a story, the first Black woman to win and the women's liberation invading the stage. It just felt like such a fantastic, rich story. And so, that's why I grabbed at it and was delighted to be part of this team.
Yeah. And then for you, Jennifer, when, the genesis of the producers even realizing that this story existed and how fantastic it would be for a film was based on you and some of the other women being on a BBC show back in 2010. And when they first came to you and said that they were interested in making the film, what was it about their artistic vision and the way that they wanted to tell this story that made you feel like you really trusted them to tell it right?
Well, it's interesting that you ask it this way, because my first telephone conversation was with Suzanne Mackey, who I feel is such a wonderful person. Actually, over the years, I've come to realize that she's a very determined person, and I think it's her determination and her force that brought this whole thing to life, because she obviously saw the potential in the story when she heard it. And to take a story that you hear on the radio and make it into a movie, of course, it took many years. She worked with the script writer, Rebecca Frey. And this is, I'm recounting what she has said herself. But it struck me every few years, she asked me to sign a contract to say that to allow them to portray me. And I'm glad she did, because it enabled me to maintain contact with her. And there were times I thought that it wasn't going to go ahead, because I know that they did have challenges. I suppose the normal challenges of putting a movie together. But in this case, a rather unusual story by any stretch of the imagination. So I say that I think it was a lot of determination on her part and the part of others that brought this whole thing to life.
Absolutely. And you've also written a book about your experience, not just in the pageant called Miss World 1970, but also about all of the work that you've done since as a diplomat, and even with the journey of this film being made. And I was really interested, at what point during the film's process did you kind of realize that you also wanted to write a book, to have that opportunity to really be able to tell your story in more detail, and also continuing from 1970 onwards to all the amazing things that you've done since?
Well, a lot of things in my life are serendipitous, really, because 2 years ago I was downsizing, and I came across my mother's papers. My mother used to write, and she had my Miss World diary, which I had misplaced years ago. Anything I had written before was from memory, but this was the diary that I had kept. I didn't write every day or anything like that, but there were days that after a week, I would put something down that I would certainly have forgotten today. and it was all coming apart. And so I started to type it, and then realized I had a manuscript. But the other thing that was important, I think, was that my life didn't stop when I won Miss World and at the end of the year. I went on to do other things, and I was determined, actually, to refocus my life in different ways. And in some respects, I wanted to challenge myself to do different things. So that was always part of me. But I always wanted to do something more than myself. And I think that all the careers that I've had in my life have been things that have been areas where I could do something useful. Including the last profession of being a psychotherapist. It's a field that you can get into at a later stage in your life, which I am, and still contribute. And in fact, it's excuse me. And in fact, age is not an obstacle in that kind of a career, because the more experience you have, the more you can help people, or so you think anyway.
Yeah, that's so wonderful. And Philippa, I wanted to ask you a little bit about the way that you worked with each of the cast. You know, obviously there's a unique lens when you're telling a true story. And I was interested in how much you really wanted them to look at the archival material, where there's such a deluge of it available online that's really accessible, which is so fantastic. And how much you really wanted them to look at the specifics, you know, the mannerisms of women like Jennifer, you know, how much you wanted Greg Kinnear to really inhabit Bob Hope, versus how much you wanted them to really just focus on the script and the way that it was characterizing the story.
I think both go together, really. I think it's a joint partnership between the script and then inhabiting the character. And many of the actors, like Keira Knightley, Gugu, and Jessie Buckley, wanted to meet their real counterparts. So Gugu spent some time in Grenada. I'm sure Jennifer can tell you about that, with lots of time to absorb and listen to Jennifer. You can take so much in when you meet the real people. Similarly, Keira Knightley wanted to meet Sally Alexander, and Jessie Buckley met Joe. So it was a very important thing to meet the counterparts that they were playing, because you just get so much free sort of characterization just by chatting to people. And then for me, it was very important that as much authenticity was sort of like plunged into the film as possible, even down to things like the girls who play the contestants, not the cast, but the other girls. I wanted them all to come from the country where they were representing, so they would have the right accent, the right look, you know. And this was such a joy. So our cast of contestants are brilliant girls who were at university or whatever, and that we found to come and be our contestants, and they became part of our great gang of people. They had to have deportment lessons, they had to learn how to get out of a car or stand properly or sit properly, because that's what they would have had to do in 1970. So from that, and also Gugu had to do that as well. She found it quite hard and a bit annoying, I have to say, parading up and down in front of our deportment coach. But that's really important, that the fact that the story is a real story, but it has to feel real as well. We can't just say it's real. It has to feel real.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, kind of speaking to having the actors all go take those deportment lessons, kind of for your journey and understanding not just what the show looked like on the front, what we saw on television, but what really went into it, the amount of work that these women put into it, the hours of dedication and training that everyone would have gone through. Kind of what was your process for learning that for yourself at the beginning so that you could really capture that on film?
We did so much research. We had bulging packs of research. And normally when I direct something, I make a kind of lookbook with thousands of photographs in, which I do with the designer, the production designer, the costume designer, the makeup designer. And we had like a Bible, which was about 150 pages long, with beautiful photographs of Jennifer in her costume. Jennifer had a book which she'd already published a few years ago, which I plundered all her fantastic photographs of exactly what costume she wore. In fact, Jennifer even lent us her real dress for the evening dress section, that Gugu appears in briefly when she runs in to the corridor before they were to go on stage, this beautiful gold lame dress, which is it's a sort of jumpsuit, isn't it, with trousers underneath.
Yes.
That's the real dress. So we spent a long time studying the archive, even down to what the girls wore for their national costume parade. They're all taken from real life, and that was really exciting to go on that journey.
Yeah. And then Jennifer, you know, kind of jumping off Philippa mentioning, obviously Gugu came to Grenada to spend time with you. And I was really interested in kind of what were some of the questions that she was asking you, or some of the details that were really important for her to know in terms of her performance. And from your perspective, what was important for you to want to share to make sure that this portrayal was going to feel really authentic to the experience that you went through at the time?
Well, I shared with her the experience that I had that really gave me the desire to want to win. Mm-hmm. Was when we had our final rehearsal, which was the night before the contest. And Eric Morley stood on stage and he called the names of 15 girls that we had thought we'd all get a chance to walk on the stage and do our final things and learn what we had to learn for the last opportunity, only to discover that we sat in the audience and only 15 girls had been chosen. And they were the 15 that almost always had had the chance to rehearse in the past, during the previous rehearsals. And sitting in the audience, I almost thought, oh no, you know, they've judged us, you know, they obviously don't think any of us have a chance. So I shared that with Gugu, and not so much of that came through in the movie, but what Philippa did capture was the opportunity that I asked for, I took the next day. It actually occurred on the morning of the show, but that I went on stage with a few other girls, and we went to the Albert Hall on our own to get used to the stage. And I was the last one to leave the Albert Hall. I had walked on the stage for probably close to 2 hours. So I knew the stage very well. I knew I didn't have to look down. I could pretend, in fact, that I was Miss World already, and I put myself in character. And then went back to the hotel and felt quite confident, because I thought at that point, you know, I've done as much as I can. Whatever happens now is fine. And I shared that with Gugu. I shared that, and Philippa caught that in a scene where Gugu walks on the stage and by herself. And I think that was, but I want to say something about Philippa, if I may.
Yes.
Philippa is amazing. You know, she reached out to Pearl Jansen, I discovered later, because for years I had tried to reach Pearl. I couldn't find her. I couldn't find her in South Africa. I thought, but this is strange. People knew who she was, and yet they couldn't tell me how to reach her. It turned out that she was not on the internet. She doesn't believe in the internet, but also she didn't have much of an opportunity to do this. She went back into what she would describe as oblivion. But Philippa found her somehow, and through, I think, correspondent, Times correspondent maybe, in South Africa, and they reached out and contacted me and told me that Pearl was available if I wanted to talk to her. And I said, absolutely. So I took her phone number and I called her, and we chatted for quite a while. It was more expensive for me to call her, of course, but I didn't mind. I was happy to do it. And to find out, to get her story from her. But she told me that Philippa had really reached out. And then I got a chance to meet her at the world premiere in London in March, which was absolutely wonderful. I mean, my two children came, Sophia, my daughter, and my son, Bo. And to my surprise later on, I said to Bo, what was the most thrilling thing about being at the premiere? He said, I got to meet Pearl. So I thought, well, Philippa made that possible. The other thing that for me, I don't want to take up all your time, but the other thing that was really special for me about getting to London in March was to meet Sally Alexander, not Sally, to meet Joe. Joe and the other gals from the women's movement, because my daughter was fascinated by them. She got hold of some of the posters that they had written for that, done for the night. And she even has a picture of herself with one of the posters. So I got to know the women. I got to know them personally, which was quite special. I have to say, it was quite special. And they are characters. They were characters then, and they continue to be characters.
That's so true. It was incredible for me, and also made me cry because these people hadn't met each other or seen each other since that event on that night. Mm-hmm. And at our premiere in London, for the first time ever, those women got to meet Jennifer and Pearl and discuss from both of their perspectives that night and what had happened in those 50 years to women. And it was really quite special.
Yeah, in kind of another sense of having more than one perspective, one of the things that you do so wonderfully, Philippa, is you really capture these two different stories, and you always keep the lens on the women. You know, even in terms of the camera placement, when the women are being asked to turn around, we don't watch the audience, we actually watch their faces. And so it's really all about their experience. And so I wanted to ask you a little bit about how that really informed a lot of the camera choices and decisions that you made throughout the film.
You've put your finger on something that's really important to me as a filmmaker, is point of view. Who does the film belong to, and who does the scene belong to? And where you put the camera is informed by that, absolutely. And to me, you're absolutely right. This film belongs to the women. It belongs to Jennifer. It belongs to Sally and Joe. And so the camera is with them all the time, inhabiting their point of view. And that was very, very important. And I think for me, as an audience, when I see that done by other filmmakers, it makes me feel very involved with the characters and really sort of understanding where they're coming from when you feel close to them like that. So that was really important. And also because there are so many characters in Misbehaviour, and we really wanted not to make a simplistic film. We wanted it to be a complex film with all the different points of view in, and not judging people. So that even more, it was important to really inhabit the different points of view there in the subjective point of view way. Yeah.
And what were the unique challenges that came with that? Because obviously you're having to make sure that you're fully serving not just each side of the story, but also each character individually, to make sure that you're not just throwing someone up on screen that we don't really know that much about. You're making sure that there's so much information and depth and layer to each of them. So kind of what were the unique challenges that come with trying to achieve that?
I think that the challenges with that start in the script writing process, actually, and making sure in the script that you're actually in the point of view in the scene. And then my job as a director is to use the camera to actually portray that. And then for the actors as well, giving them a wonderful arena to give their best work and making it a fantastic place, a safe place for them to feel free to be the character that they want to be. And I have to say all the actors in Misbehaviour were absolutely fantastic to work with, and we had a really, really fun time doing it. It was really great.
Yeah, and it's so clear even just from watching the film that you do such a good job at balancing what each individual actor needs for their performance, in terms of, you know, creating a space that feels really safe for them, where they can really open up emotionally. And, you know, there was something that Naomi Harris said about working with you on HBO's The Third Day, that like you really create this space of where it feels like there's a safety net, but also there's a lot of freedom to try things, knowing that there is that backup there. And I was just really interested in how you create that for actors to begin with, because you're so good at capturing emotionally raw performances, and then how you also balance that when you've got such a large ensemble cast in really catering it individually to what each of their individual needs are.
I think it's so interesting, that question, because some actors are more confident than others. Some need different things. Some need quiet, some need, you know, chat. Like lovely Rhys Ifans was just always cracking jokes and getting the giggles beforehand with Keeley Hawes. That was very funny. Each actor needs a different kind of space. And I suppose your job as a director is to really understand them, and to understand the character that they're portraying, and I don't know, give them loads of confidence. When you love something they're doing, tell them, and don't just sit there back coolly and think that they're not a human being, because they are artists. I feel like actors are artists, and that they need, you are the sounding board as the director for what they're doing, and receiving the emotion from them is really important. And making sure you're open to any kind of emotion, and then you're the sounding board for that, I think.
Yeah, that's really wonderful. And then Jennifer, I wanted to jump back in a little bit about, your experience when you first watched the film as well. And you were mentioning, wanting to meet the women from the women's liberation movement and how wonderful that was. Has the experience of this film being made and getting the opportunity to see the story told in the way that Philippa's captured it kind of evolved your perspective on what happened at the time, and what that journey was like, not just for yourself, but for all the other women involved?
Well, I'd like to say that when I first met Philippa, I had had a conversation with my daughter before going to England. And she had said, "Mom, I'm really concerned about how they're going to portray you." And I said this to Philippa. I said this when we met all together. And she said to me, "Jennifer, you can tell her that we're going to make a movie that we'll all be proud of." And when I left Philippa, when I left England and came back home, I felt in my heart, even though I was writing the book and I was going to put the book out, I felt a sense of ease because I had picked up from Philippa what she obviously portrays, or she is able to give to her actors and actresses working with her. And that is the feeling of confidence, and not so much confidence, but the fact that she was sincere when she said that to me. I think she really genuinely felt that way. And yes, coming back to your question, I felt that the movie is quite amazing. It's most entertaining, but it's very historical. And she's been very clever. And the group of them, the women that put this movie together, have done a wonderful job in 2 hours to tell a story which really is an important story, not just because it's all about women, but because it's a timely story. It's timely in so many ways. It's timely for women. It shows, as Philippa said at the beginning, it serves as a baseline, really, in saying to yourself, well, this happened then. Really, how far have we come? And of course, we all know that while we have achieved a lot, we still have a long way to go. And this movie is very timely. It also brings the issue of race into it. We had apartheid then, and we also had a lot of misogyny in the way things and the way everything was being portrayed, as is evident in the movie. And even in that area, we can judge whether we've come and how far we've come.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right that it's a great reminder of how far we've come, but how far still is to go. And, kind of with that in mind as well, Philippa, with Jennifer mentioning, obviously the film touches on a lot of political issues from the time as well, going all the way into apartheid that was still taking place in South Africa. Kind of how do you balance making a film where you really manage to capture so many different moments of political discourse from that time period, but still making sure that it feels like a central focus is on the characters and that you're really driving character and emotion to tell that story with those details in it?
I think the first thing is that you have to make a film that's going to really entertain people. It would be impossible to make a very serious film about a group of women throwing flower bombs at Bob Hope, let's face it. But buried in that story are very, very serious themes. And when we found Pearl, which I really wanted to do, and when I started, we hadn't found her. We've managed to get hold of Pearl. and to learn more about her story and what a cost it was to her to come to the UK and be part of it. You know, you want to give the audience real characters, but things that can spark an interest in them and inspire them to go and find out more. Mm-hmm. So for instance, young people I know who've been very inspired by the story. My daughter, who's 21, you know, she was so inspired by seeing this story, as were many young women, and it makes them want to go and find out more. So anything to do with that, race relations or what was happening in the world of feminism, then it's like a springboard for people to go and discover more. But also the other very important thing that's happened this year, I think, is the Black Lives Matter movement. And that is very important. And I just hope that something like this small story of Jennifer winning Miss World and having a fantastic Black actress, Gugu, and Louise Harrison there, and all of those girls in the contestants from every country all over the world that we managed to get in, just shows you how important it is to celebrate other stories and to put, you know, Black women center to things. And that has been a huge pleasure for me to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. And very, very important talent, you know, those talented women. And as I've just made the third day with Naomi Harris, again, another amazing Black female actress. How lucky am I to have had the privilege to do that in 2 pieces of work, and I will continue to do that, I hope, as well. Very, very important.
That's so wonderful, and I completely agree with everything that you're both just saying to that point. And I want to thank you so much for taking time to talk about the process behind making this film. It's really, really wonderful, and I hope that everyone watching this will check out Misbehaviour, available via video on demand. Thank you so much, Philippa and Jennifer.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thank you.